My father waited until the lobster shells had been cleared before he asked me to pay. 16 people sat around the private dining table at the Hawthorne Room. 2 empty Bordeaux bottles rested in silver buckets, streaked with melting ice. My mother held her napkin against her mouth, as if she were waiting for a verdict, while my younger sister watched me with the bright, nervous expectation of someone who already knew how the scene was supposed to end. "You're covering this, right?" Dad asked. His smile was calm, almost affectionate. "After everything, it's the least you owe us." Every face turned toward me. I placed my napkin beside my untouched plate and stood. "I'll take care of exactly what belongs to me," I said. 4 days earlier, I had still believed the dinner might be an apology. That Thursday began with a refrigeration alarm at one of the 4 restaurants I supervised outside Columbus. By 7:15, 12 cases of salmon were warming inside a failing walk-in cooler. A delivery truck was stuck on Interstate 70, and a 19-year-old prep cook named Jonah was fighting tears because he believed he had caused the breakdown. He had not. A compressor had failed overnight. I redirected the delivery, moved the usable inventory to our sister location, called an emergency technician, and found Jonah standing alone near the dish station. "You reported the temperature when you noticed it," I told him. "That protected the guests and the restaurant. You did your job." His shoulders slowly lowered. Watching him breathe again reminded me why I loved the work. A crisis became manageable when someone refused to turn fear into blame, punishment, or shame. Crisis management was the part of my work nobody photographed for corporate newsletters. I was Claire Bennett, 33 years old, Regional Operations Director for a small hospitality group. People saw the title and assumed I spent my days tasting new menus. Mostly, I solved problems before customers realized they existed. By 10:30, the cooler was running again. I returned to my office, opened a labor report, and watched my phone light up beside the keyboard. "You were added to Bennett family." For several seconds, I simply stared. The group icon was still the photograph from a Thanksgiving 6 years earlier. Dad holding the carving knife, Mom laughing beside him, Madison leaning against my shoulder. I had been removed from that chat 3 years ago. No goodbye. No explanation, beyond the sentence my father had delivered before pointing toward his front door. The message history was empty. Either my family had erased it, or they had created another conversation after excluding me. Both possibilities hurt in different ways. Then my mother's name appeared. "Claire, sweetheart, your father and I have spent a great deal of time thinking about everything that happened. We don't want another year to pass like this. We would love to take you to dinner Sunday at the Hawthorne Room. Just the 4 of us, Dad, me, you, and Madison. Something quiet. A fresh start." I read the message twice, searching for the words "I'm sorry." They were not there. A second message arrived. "Family takes care of family. Maybe it's time we remembered that." My chest tightened before my mind could explain why. A colleague passing my office noticed my expression and paused in the doorway. "Bad news?" "I don't know yet." I turned the phone so she could read the invitation. She knew only that I had not spoken to my family in years. "Do you want to go?" she asked. That should have been an easy question. I managed budgets larger than my parents' mortgage. I negotiated vendor contracts, disciplined managers twice my age, and closed restaurants during emergencies without raising my voice. Yet one carefully worded message from my mother reduced me to the daughter who still waited for permission to belong. "I want to know whether they miss me," I said. My colleague looked at the screen. Did she say they did? No. She had said they had been thinking. She had said time was passing. She had said family took care of family. But I remembered my mother singing while she cooked on Sunday mornings. I remembered Dad teaching me to change a tire in the rain. I remembered Madison crawling into my bed during thunderstorms when we were children. Estrangement did not erase love. It merely forced love to live beside anger, where neither could rest. I was not expecting a perfect apology. I would have accepted an awkward one. I wanted one honest sentence saying they missed me, not what I provided. Still, hope is rarely reasonable. That is why it survives so much evidence. I typed, "I'll be there." Mom answered with a red heart almost immediately. I turned the phone face down and returned to my labor report. The numbers blurred. Beneath my desk, my hands had begun to tremble. For the rest of the day, I told myself it was only dinner. I did not yet understand that my family had already decided what my return would cost. In my family, being dependable had always sounded like praise. At 19, I worked dinner shifts at a steakhouse near campus and came home smelling of coffee, bleach, and grilled onions. One January night, I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table with an electric shutoff notice. Dad's contracting business was waiting on 2 late payments, she explained. Madison needed money for a school trip. The checking account was nearly empty. I emptied the tips from my apron onto the table. The next morning, Mom hugged me and whispered, "Family takes care of family." I carried those words like a medal. At 22, Dad's truck lost its transmission. The truck was essential to his business, but admitting that he could not afford the repair seemed harder for him than losing it. I paid the mechanic and told Dad the manufacturer had covered most of the bill. He accepted that fiction because it protected his pride. Later came Mom's dental crowns, Madison's first apartment deposit, a Christmas emergency, and wedding flowers for a cousin his fiancé had been laid off. None of the requests sounded unreasonable by themselves. Together, they formed a quiet education. When the family hurt, Claire paid. When Claire paid, peace returned. The break came 3 years before the invitation. Madison had fallen in love with an exposed brick cafe online and named her own concept Juniper and Gold before pricing a commercial espresso machine. Her vision was beautiful, her planning was not. The project required roughly $75,000 for the lease, equipment, construction, permits, and startup cash. A lender rejected her application because she lacked experience, savings, credible projections, and collateral. My parents invited me over on a Sunday afternoon. A folder waited on the coffee table. Dad did not ask whether I wanted to participate. He explained that my credit could secure the equipment financing and strengthen the lease application. Mom called it a chance to invest in Madison's future. I opened the folder. Where are the sales projections? Madison blinked. The lender has all that. No, they don't. That's why they said no. Her face hardened. I asked about rent increases, payroll, food costs, insurance, supplier terms, and the amount she expected each customer to spend. Madison stared at me as though I had criticized her character rather than her numbers. "You run restaurants," she said. "You could help me make it work. I can help you build a real plan. I can't guarantee debt without one. Your sister needs faith, Claire, not an audit." Dad pushed the papers toward me. "Sign them. She is your sister, and you have the credit." The old instinct rose immediately. End the conflict, protect everyone, restore peace. I imagined signing my name and being welcomed back into the familiar role of the good daughter. Then I imagined the lease coming due after a slow winter, equipment payments piling up, and $75,000 becoming my responsibility. I let their disappointment remain. No. Madison began crying. Mom accused me of treating family like a balance sheet. Dad stood so abruptly that his recliner struck the wall. "If you won't help this family," he said, pointing toward the front door, "then stop pretending you're part of it."
By Monday morning, I had been removed from the family group chat. Calls went unanswered, birthday cards stopped. Relatives who did contact me repeated the same version. Madison had possessed a dream, and I had starved it because money mattered more to me than blood. Several months later, Juniper Gold opened anyway. I saw the photographs online. Brass pendant lights, pale wood counters, Madison smiling beneath a painted gold logo. I did not know where the money had come from. Part of me felt relieved that she had found another way. Another part waited for someone to admit that my refusal had not destroyed her future. No one did. The first year of estrangement, I kept expecting an emergency call. During the second, I began therapy with Dr. Maya Chen. She listened as I described my family and asked a question I resented. "What do you miss most?" "My parents, my sister." "What about them?" I could not answer. Eventually, the truth emerged. I missed being useful. I missed the temporary warmth that followed every rescue. I had confused relief with affection and dependence with belonging. Being needed is not the same as being loved, Dr. Chen told me, and love that requires your financial surrender is not care. It is a contract you never agreed to. She taught me to pause before saying yes, to let adults experience the consequences of their own choices, to understand that empathy could accompany a boundary without erasing it. On Sunday evening, I dressed for dinner. Before starting my aging Honda,
I wrote 3 sentences on a yellow note and pressed it above the steering wheel. 1 dinner. No money. Then home. The drive to the Hawthorne Room took 40 minutes. Autumn light faded over the interstate as hope and dread traded places inside my chest. I told myself I was going to meet my family, but as the restaurant appeared ahead, glowing behind rows of manicured trees, I wondered whether they had invited Claire Bennett, or only the version of me who always signed where they pointed. The Hawthorne Room sat at the end of a stone drive, its windows glowing amber beneath maple trees. I slowed as I entered the parking lot. Then I saw my father's truck. 2 rows over was Mom's silver SUV. Beside it sat Aunt Linda's red Lexus, Uncle Grant's minivan, Madison's crossover, and several other cars I recognized from holidays I had not attended. Every instinct therapy had sharpened told me this invitation had already become something else entirely. I kept both hands on the steering wheel. Just the 4 of us, I said aloud. The note above the dashboard seemed to answer me. 1 dinner. No money. Then home. I could still leave. No one had seen me yet. I could drive back to my apartment and tell Mom that dishonesty had ended the evening before it began. For almost a minute, I considered it. Then I realized I did not want fear making the decision for me. Leaving because I chose to leave would be a boundary. Fleeing before I understood what they had arranged would feel like surrender. I parked and went inside. The hostess greeted me beneath a brass chandelier. When I gave her the Bennett name, she smiled at her reservation screen. Of course, the private room is ready. Mr. Bennett signed the dining agreement last week. Dining agreement? Yes, there's a food and beverage minimum for the room. He paid the $500 deposit and left a card on file. Years in restaurant operations had trained me to notice details most guests ignored. The reservation holder had signed the contract. The deposit belonged to his account. The card on file belonged to him. Unless someone else voluntarily assumed the bill, the restaurant would look to the host. I thanked her and followed a server down a carpeted hallway. The private room doors stood open. 16 chairs surrounded a table long enough for a board meeting. 15 were occupied. For 1 suspended second, nobody moved. Then Mom rose, and the room erupted into applause. There she is, Aunt Linda shouted. Mom crossed the room and wrapped me in a hug before I could decide whether I wanted one. Her perfume was the same soft rose scent she had worn when I was a child. Surprise, she whispered. Over her shoulder, I saw what had already been ordered. Split lobster tails rested on platters beside oysters, crab claws, and shaved ice. Slices of Wagyu beef glistened under warm lights. Small plates crowded every open space. A Bordeaux bottle leaned nearly empty in a silver bucket. This was not dinner. It was staging. I stepped back. You said 4 people. Well, yes, that was the original idea. She laughed too brightly. Then your aunt heard, and somehow the news traveled. Everyone wanted to welcome you back. Dad rose from the chair at the head of the table. He looked older than he had 3 years earlier, though his posture held the same practiced authority. No reason to make a problem out of people loving you, he said. The only empty chair was directly across from him. I sat. To my left, my cousin Olivia gave me an uncertain smile. Unlike everyone else, she had not applauded for long. Her hands rested tensely in her lap, and when our eyes met, she looked away. Madison sat beside Mom, scrolling through her phone. She wore a cream sweater and gold hoops. For several seconds, she did not acknowledge me. A young server approached. His name tag read Ethan. Can I bring you a cocktail or help you choose an entree? Sparkling water, please. He glanced at the crowded table. Nothing else. Just the water, and please keep it separate. His expression changed slightly, but I knew he understood. Absolutely. At the head of the table, Dad lifted the wine list. Bring another bottle of the Bordeaux, he told Ethan, and another Wagyu board. Put everything on the card attached to the reservation. We are celebrating. He said it loudly enough for the room to hear.
The performance was clear. Richard Bennett, successful businessman and generous patriarch, hosting a reunion he could easily afford. Aunt Linda leaned toward me. You must be doing very well. Regional director, isn't it? Before I could answer, Uncle Grant smiled. We heard about the promotion. Congratulations. I looked at Mom. I had never told her. She reached for her wine. News travels.
The questions that followed sounded friendly, but carried edges. Was my apartment still in the expensive part of town? Did corporate pay bonuses? Did I travel first class? Madison finally looked up long enough to say that some people were lucky to have stable careers. Ethan returned with my water and quietly placed a separate check presenter near my elbow. The gesture studied me. Linda raised her glass. To Claire, she announced, the successful one who finally remembered where she came from. Crystal lifted around the table. I raised nothing. As they drank, I understood that they had not gathered simply to see me. They were waiting for me to prove that I still knew my assigned role. Dinner moved forward with the careful cruelty of a conversation designed to leave no visible bruises. Aunt Linda asked whether people in corporate hospitality still received enormous performance bonuses. Uncle Grant joked that my apartment must have a wine cellar. Someone at the far end of the table said it must be nice not to worry about grocery prices. Mom smiled each time a comment landed. "Let's not interrogate her," she said, in the tone of someone enjoying every answer. Madison sliced a piece of Wagyu. "It's strange. You disappear for 3 years and everyone else is left dealing with real life." I was told I was no longer part of the family. You know Dad didn't mean it literally. Dad continued eating. Linda leaned closer. Parents say things when they're hurt. Children are supposed to understand that. I was 33, but in that room, the word children meant people who owed obedience forever. Across the table, a cousin I had not seen since the estrangement lifted his wineglass. "Claire, thank you for doing this. Amy and I haven't had a night out like this in years." I set down my water. "Why are you thanking me?" His smile faltered. "For dinner." Before he could say more, Mom laughed. "Everyone's grateful to be together. Must we analyze every sentence?" The table moved on, but something had shifted. 2 people exchanged glances. Olivia looked down at her plate. Ethan returned with the second Bordeaux. Linda complained that the first course had been cleared too quickly, then criticized the delay in replacing a fork she had dropped. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Ethan said. "You should be. This is supposed to be a high-end restaurant." "He's doing fine," I said. Linda turned toward me. I was speaking to him. And I was speaking about him. For a moment, Ethan looked surprised. Then he nodded and continued pouring wine. When he returned with my water, he placed it closer to my hand, as though offering an anchor. His kindness was professional, but it felt more sincere than anything my family had said since I entered. The pressure continued. No one raised a voice. That was how our family preferred its cruelty. Polished, deniable, and served between courses with expensive wine and practiced smiles. Mom mentioned that Dad had worked through back pain so his daughters could have opportunities. Linda observed that some people remembered sacrifice only when it benefited them. Madison said she had learned not to expect support from people who treated relationships like business transactions. Each remark arrived wrapped in enough general language to be denied. I felt the familiar impulse to defend myself, to list every bill I had paid and every holiday I had spent solving problems no one else wanted to face. Dr. Chen's voice returned instead. "You do not have to prove your goodness to people who benefit from doubting it." My phone vibrated against my thigh. The message was from Olivia, seated less than 2 feet away. "Please don't react yet. We were told you invited us." I read it twice. When I looked at her, she kept her eyes on her plate. Another message appeared. "I only realized something was wrong when you asked why he thanked you. I'm sorry. You need to see this." 4 screenshots followed from a group chat tailed dinner plan. The first message was from Mom. "Tell Claire it's only the 4 of us. She won't come if she knows everyone will be there." Dad had replied, "Seat her across from me. She hates public conflict. I'll handle the ask." Madison, "Order the expensive things before she arrives. Once they're on the table, she won't make a scene." Linda, "Everyone already thinks Claire is hosting. Keep it that way." My breathing slowed. There were messages about parking, arrival times, and who should mention my promotion. Linda had instructed relatives to thank me early so I would feel committed. Mom reminded everyone not to discuss money until after dessert. Then I reached a message from Dad. "If she pays tonight, we'll know she's ready to help with the real problem." Below it, Mom had written, "I'll bring the envelope. We give it to her after dessert, once things feel like family again." The screenshots did not explain what the envelope contained. They did not need to. For 3 years, I had imagined reasons my parents might contact me. Illness, regret, loneliness, the realization that losing a daughter hurt more than winning an argument. I had never imagined they would rehearse my return at a sales presentation. The pain was sharp, but it did not scatter me. It settled into something quiet and solid. The dinner had not gone wrong. It had been designed by design. Olivia sent one final message. I should have questioned it sooner. I typed beneath the table. Don't say anything yet. Let them finish telling the story they prepared. When I raised my eyes, Mom was watching me. Everything all right? Fine. She studied my face, searching for evidence that I knew. Near her chair, her handbag rested partly open. Her fingers slipped inside and closed around a thick white envelope. For an instant, she lifted it high enough for me to read the blue lettering across the corner. Mortgage Reinstatement Department. Then she pushed it deeper into the bag and smiled as if the evening were still about forgiveness. I returned my attention to the table and let everyone believe the message on my phone was harmless. Mom was telling a story about a neighbor's kitchen renovation. Dad nodded at the appropriate moments, but his eyes kept dropping toward his phone. Each time the screen lit, he turned it face down. Once before he covered it, I saw the name of a regional bank. I took a sip of water. So Madison, I said, how is Juniper and Gold? The question stopped her fork halfway to her mouth.
For 3 years, no one had told me what happened after the photographs of the grand opening disappeared from social media. Madison set down her fork and looked toward Mom. It closed, she said, last year. I'm sorry. Her expression sharpened, as if sympathy offended her more than criticism. The landlord was impossible. The economy changed. People say they support local businesses, but then they buy $6 coffee from chains, and the staff had no loyalty. How long were you open? 11 months. Dad reached for the Bordeaux. She gave it everything she had. I believed that. Effort had never been Madison's only problem. She worked hard at the parts of a dream that could be photographed. She resisted the parts that required limits, numbers, and adjustment. What happened to the equipment? I asked. Why does that matter? Mom said quickly. I was curious. Madison pushed food around her plate. Some of it was sold. And the rest? Claire, Dad warned. I let the question go. Their reaction answered enough. Instead, I looked at him. How is Bennett commercial? His company had once handled small office renovations and retail build-outs across central Ohio. He used to mention active projects the way other men discussed weather. We're between contracts, he said. The market is slow. Since when? Business has cycles. Aunt Linda cleared her throat. Richard has been under enormous pressure. Mom shot her a glance. Dad's phone lit again. He covered it, but not before I saw 3 missed calls. The expensive watch he had worn every day for nearly a decade was gone from his wrist. A faint pale line remained where the leather band had shielded his skin from the sun. Mom smiled too broadly. We're fine. We've simply had to postpone a few things. The kitchen renovation, a vacation. Linda reached for her wine. A letter from the bank is more than postponing a vacation. The room went still. Dad's voice dropped. Linda. She blinked, realizing too late that she had stepped outside the script. I only meant everyone has financial stress. Mom began talking about interest rates. Dad began cutting his steak with enough force to scrape the plate. Piece by piece, their performance cracked. A cousin near the end of the table leaned toward Olivia. I thought this was a promotion dinner. Olivia met my eyes before answering. So did I. Mom laughed. It can be more than one thing. Did Claire invite us? Olivia asked. The question sounded casual, but it traveled through the room like a match flame. Mom pressed her napkin flat against her lap. There seems to have been a small misunderstanding. Uncle Grant frowned. Elaine, you said Claire wanted the whole family here. I said she wanted a fresh start. That isn't the same thing. Dad lifted his glass. We are not turning a family dinner into a courtroom. No one answered, but several people stopped eating. The staff cleared the entree plates. Linda ordered creme brulee. Madison requested the chocolate soufflé, which Ethan explained would take 20 minutes. Dad encouraged everyone else to choose dessert and coffee. They were stretching the evening toward the envelope. As Ethan collected menus, Madison finished another glass of wine. Honestly, Claire, you should relax. You can afford one dinner. Mom's hand froze around her coffee cup. I looked at Madison. Afford what? She waved toward the platters, wine bottles, and empty plates. All of this. We were told you were treating. The silence was immediate. Mom turned to her. Madison. What? Everyone already knows. Apparently not everyone, Olivia said. Madison's cheeks flushed. Dad leaned back, studying me. Uncle Grant tried to soften the moment. Maybe this is all confusion. Claire, what exactly do you do now? It was the first honest question anyone had asked me that evening.
I oversee 4 restaurants, I said. Staffing, vendor contracts, food safety, insurance compliance, operating budgets, profit reports, and private event agreements. Linda shifted in her chair. I continued. I review every step from the moment an order enters the building until the final check is closed. Dad's expression changed. Only slightly, but I saw it. I know exactly how private dining contracts work, I said, and I know who is responsible for them. Dessert arrived. No one seemed hungry anymore. Dad waited until Ethan had placed the last souffle on the table. Then he folded his hands and looked directly at me. Claire, he said, his voice gentle enough to sound rehearsed, you're covering this, right? After everything we've done, it's the least you owe us. For years, that tone had been enough. It made surrender sound gracious and resistance sound cruel, as though love could be measured by how I reached for my wallet. Around him, 16 place settings reflected the candlelight. The performance had reached the line they had all been waiting for. No one moved. 3 years earlier, I would have filled the silence before it could turn against me. I would have smiled, reached for my wallet, and called the expense a gift. I had spent much of my life paying for peace, then wondering why peace never lasted. This time, I let the silence belong to them. I'll take care of exactly what belongs to me. Mom exhaled. Linda gave Madison a relieved glance. Dad leaned back as though the matter had been settled. I stood and walked toward the service corridor. Ethan was entering an order at a terminal. When he saw me, he stepped aside. Is everything okay? I need to speak with your manager. A few moments later, a man in a dark suit approached and introduced himself as Marcus Cole. His manner was calm, attentive, and carefully neutral, the manner of someone who had handled marriage proposals, medical emergencies, and divorces beneath the same dining room nights. I explained the situation without dramatizing it. I didn't organize this event, I didn't sign the private room agreement, authorize the food and wine, or offer to pay for the group. I ordered 1 sparkling water and asked for it separately. Marcus nodded. Let me verify the reservation. He opened the event file on the terminal. Richard Bennett's name appeared at the top. Your father signed the agreement. He paid a $500 deposit and accepted the food and beverage minimum. The card ending in 4211 is attached to the account. What is the total? He reviewed the check. $4,186, including tax and service charge. After the deposit, the remaining balance is $3,686. The number did not shock me. I had estimated something close from the bottles and platters alone. I'd like to close my sparkling water now. Marcus separated it. I paid and added a $100 gratuity for Ethan. Ethan looked at the receipt. You don't have to do that. I know, you've handled a difficult table with patience. His expression softened. Thank you. I turned to Marcus. Please present the remaining check to the person who signed the contract. We would have done that regardless, he said. I'll manage it discreetly. That sentence mattered. I was not redirecting someone else's debt. I was refusing to accept a debt that had never been mine. When I returned, dessert plates had been pushed aside. Mom gave me a tentative smile, and Madison looked almost triumphant. I sat down and finished my water.
Several minutes later, Ethan entered carrying a black check presenter. He walked past me and placed it beside Dad's right hand. Dad stared at it. I believe this belongs to you, sir, Ethan said quietly. The room was so still that everyone heard him. Dad glanced at me, then opened a folder. His face tightened at the total, but he recovered quickly. Of course, he said. I arranged the evening. He removed a credit card and handed it to Ethan with the confidence of a man performing generosity for an audience. Ethan returned 2 minutes later and bent close to him. I'm sorry, sir. The card was declined. Dad's jaw flexed. Run it again. We already attempted it twice. Then your machine is wrong. Marcus stepped into the room. Our system is operating normally, Mr. Bennett. We're happy to try another form of payment. Dad pulled out a second card. The confidence was gone now. Ethan processed it and returned with the same answer. Mom opened her purse and produced another card. Use mine. It failed as well. The humiliation Dad had tried to assign to me settled around him instead, but I felt no satisfaction. What I saw was not a villain receiving punishment. I saw an aging man whose pride had constructed a room he could no longer afford to leave. Marcus kept his voice respectful. We can divide the balance among the guests, or continue working with the reservation holder. Uncle Grant looked up sharply. Divide it? Why would we divide it? Elaine told us Claire was hosting. Another cousin turned toward Mom. You said she had invited everybody. We ordered what you recommended because you said it was covered, someone else added. Mom's face drained of color. Olivia placed both hands on the table. Claire never invited us. Linda pointed toward me. This is exactly what she wanted. She is humiliating her father over money. I didn't decline his card, I said. The bank did. Dad pressed both palms against the table. For the first time that evening, his voice lost its performance. We needed you to get us through Monday. The anger in the room gave way to confusion. What happens Monday? I asked. Mom reached into her handbag, gripping the white envelope I had seen earlier. Her hand trembled. The envelope slipped between her fingers, struck the edge of her chair, and fell open on the floor. Several pages slipped across the carpet.
Aunt Linda bent to gather them, but Olivia was closer. She picked up the first page and stopped. I could read the bold heading from my chair, Mortgage Reinstatement Statement. Beneath it, in a boxed line beside the words Amount Required, was the number they had planned to place in front of me after dessert. The dinner had never been the real request. It had only been the test. $68,214. Olivia held the mortgage statement in both hands while the pages around her settled against the carpet. The first sheet listed missed payments, late fees, and the amount required to stop the loan from moving deeper into pre-foreclosure. The second was a refinancing application. Several lines were blank, but my name, employer, annual income, and office address had already been written in pencil beneath the section marked co-borrower. On the top page, in Mom's handwriting, were 4 words: Claire signs after dinner. The room seemed to contract. Uncle Grant looked from the paperwork to my parents. You brought loan documents? Mom stood too quickly and nearly knocked over her chair. They were only options. Options for whom, I asked. Her mouth opened, but no answer came. Olivia unlocked her phone. There's more. Linda reached toward her. This is family business. No, Olivia said, drawing the phone back. It became everyone's business when you lied to get us here. She read the messages aloud. Don't tell Claire how many people are coming. Make sure the expensive food is already ordered. Once she pays the dinner bill, give her the envelope. If she refuses in front of everyone, remind her what Richard and Elaine sacrificed for her. With each message, another relative shifted away from my parents. The anger was not immediate or theatrical. It appeared in smaller ways. Lowered glasses, tightened jaws, chairs moving inches apart. Dad looked at Olivia. You had no right to share private messages. You had no right to use us as witnesses in a setup, she replied. Madison began crying. Nobody was setting anyone up. We were trying to save the house. There it was, the sentence honest enough to break the rest open. Dad sank back into his chair. After I refused to guarantee Juniper and Gold, he admitted he and Mom had opened a home equity line of credit. They used it for Madison's lease deposit, equipment, construction overruns, and the months when the cafe failed to cover payroll. When the business closed, much of the equipment sold for less than they owed. Then Bennett Commercial lost 2 major contracts. Dad used credit cards to cover company expenses while waiting for work that never came. Mom paid minimum balances and moved money between accounts, believing one good contract would repair everything. Mortgage payments fell behind. Notices arrived. They hid them from relatives and from each other whenever possible. We thought we could fix it, Mom said. You thought I could fix it, I replied. Dad's eyes met mine. The anger had drained from them, leaving exhaustion. We're drowning, he said, and you're standing on shore. For one dangerous second, pity pulled me toward the role I knew best. I saw my father teaching me to hold a flashlight while he repaired the kitchen sink. I saw Mom waiting awake when I came home from late shifts. I saw Madison at 8 years old climbing into my bed during thunderstorms. Love did not disappear simply because people had used it badly, but neither did love erase responsibility. You didn't ask me for a rope, I said quietly. You invited me onto the boat after you drilled holes in it. Mom covered her face. I told them I was sorry they were in danger of losing the house. I meant it. That house held birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings, and the pencil marks measuring our childhood heights inside the pantry door. But I would not pay the dinner bill. I would not sign the refinancing application, become a co-borrower, empty my savings, or guarantee another debt. If you had called and told me the truth, I said, I would have listened. I might have helped you find real advice. Instead, you built a trap and called it reconciliation. Dad stared at the table. I offered one form of help. I would pay directly for an appointment with a nonprofit credit counselor, a housing counselor, and an initial bankruptcy consultation. No cash, no signatures, no hidden agreements. That's not help, Linda said. It is help, I answered. It just isn't rescue. No one applauded, no one called me brave. The moment was too painful for triumph. I understood that boundaries rarely look heroic from inside a family system built on surrender. They look cold, selfish, even cruel, especially to the people who benefited from your inability to say no. Still, discomfort was not proof that I was wrong at all. Marcus returned and explained that the remaining restaurant balance could be divided by household. The relatives who had been misled reluctantly provided cards, directing their anger toward the people who had invited them under false pretenses. I picked up my purse. Outside, the autumn now felt colder than before. In my Honda, the yellow note still waited above the steering wheel. One dinner, no money, then home. My phone filled with messages before I left the parking lot. Accusations, pleas, demands that I return. I opened Bennett Family, selected leave conversation, and watched my name disappear.
For 3 years, silence had felt like punishment. That night, it felt like freedom. Olivia texted me the following morning. I am sorry I believed them. I am even more sorry that I stayed quiet after things started feeling wrong. We met for coffee a week later. She looked exhausted, as though honesty had cost her sleep. I should have questioned the story before you were already sitting there, she said. You did speak up, I told her. That mattered. Not soon enough. I understood the shame beneath her words. Silence had been our family's preferred form of cooperation. People did not have to approve of cruelty. They only had to remain polite while it happened. Next time, I said, don't wait until someone is already sitting inside the trap. She nodded. Over the following months, Olivia began declining gatherings where guilt was used as entertainment. My parents could not raise the money required to reinstate the mortgage. With help from a housing counselor, they sold the house during pre-foreclosure before the bank completed the process. The sale covered most of the secured debt, though it left them with little afterward. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment 30 minutes outside Columbus. Bennett Commercial closed. I paid directly for the first counseling appointment,
exactly as I had offered. Mom attended. Dad refused. When I called once to ask whether he would reconsider, he said, "I don't need my daughter treating me like a failed man." "I don't think you're a failed man," I said. "I think you made decisions that failed." He hung up. I did not call again. I had to learn that I could leave an offer of healthy help on the table without forcing anyone to accept it. Madison found work answering phones at a dental office. 4 months later, she sent me a listing for a new apartment. The message beneath it was brief. "Can you co-sign? My credit took a hit because of the cafe, and I need a fresh start." Her new beginning still required my name beneath her risk. I told her I would not co-sign. I sent links to apartments within her income range and offered to help her build a monthly budget. Her anger made me start typing a defense, then delete it. A boundary did not become unkind simply because someone disliked it. 6 months after the dinner, a letter arrived from Mom. It was handwritten on plain stationery. There was no emergency marked in red, no bank document enclosed, and no request for money. She apologized for lying about the guest list. She apologized for allowing my income and credit score to become family property in her mind. She admitted that she had used the phrase, "family takes care of family," whenever she wanted obedience to sound like love. She did not blame Dad. She did not blame Madison. She did not ask me to forgive her. At the end, she wrote that she had attended 3 sessions with a housing counselor and had begun meeting with a therapist. If I was willing, she wanted to see me. She suggested a diner near my office and added that she would understand if the answer was no. I carried the letter to my next appointment with Dr. Chen. "An apology is information," she reminded me. "It is not an obligation." 2 weeks later, I agreed to prefest. Mom was already seated when I arrived. She stood, then stopped herself from reaching for me. That small hesitation told me she had finally considered that affection could not be taken without permission. We sat across from each other in a vinyl booth. Her apology was not elegant, but it was specific. She named the false invitation, the dinner plan, the loan documents, and the years she had praised me only when I solved problems. She cried without using her tears as an argument. "I wanted the security you gave us," she said. "I kept calling that love because I was ashamed to call it dependence." I told her I was not ready to return to the family as though nothing had happened. I might never have the relationship she wanted. "I understand," she said. The waitress brought her coffee and eggs. We spoke carefully about ordinary things, my work, her apartment, a book she was reading. Nothing was repaired in one morning. Repair, I was learning, was not a dramatic reunion. It was truth repeated consistently over time. When the waitress asked whether the bill was together or separate, Mom answered first. "Separate checks, please." She paid for her breakfast. I paid for mine. 2 checks lay between us, not as a wall, but as evidence that 2 people could remain connected without one becoming responsible for the other. For most of my life, I thought love meant reaching for the check before anyone else could. That morning, as my mother paid for her own coffee and I paid for mine, I understood something quieter and far more honest. Love does not require one person to disappear, so everyone else can remain comfortable.